Hello, family. This is Yeshayahu once again. I know it's been a while. I've been trying out that AI stuff, and but I think for this channel, I'm going to predominantly depend on myself because what we're going to do here on this channel, Yeshayahu, we are going to continue going through the entire Bible, and this is going to take a while, considering it's been a good little while since I've uploaded on this channel. So bear with me. But the last time where we left off was Genesis chapter 1. And we went through the first 5 days of creation. So we're going to continue with the sixth day. And the sixth day is a little interesting because, well, it's the creation of man, essentially. And there's a lot of meaning in each day. But there's certain days that have, more obvious overtones, and you'll see it. So we're going to dive into that. We're going to start off. Let me move my mouse over. So it's about here, Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Well, let's go back to chapter or the fifth day real quick and just remember, let's reminisce and see what he did on day 5. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly, after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. So the Most High Yahweh also gave commandment to the animals, in fact, the entire creation, to go forth and be fruitful and multiply. So that was a commandment. He wanted to see the increase of his creation, basically. And so that was programmed into all the animals. And we'll see he also does that with man. And it says here, in the evening and the morning were the fifth day. And God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing and beasts of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. So now we're going to creep over to the sixth day. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. So let's pause here. There's a couple of things I want to point out real quick. Genesis is a book where you can't just read it really fast. I shouldn't call it a book. It's a scripture. Men made books, but God made scripture. It's a difference. So notice it says, let's go back up here. Let us make man in our image. Well, let's start with this. We've talked about it before, but who's the us? I know people have said, it's God and the angels, right? Well, no, it wasn't God and the angels, because God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. And if you understand angels, remember, in the resurrection, you should be like the angels of heaven, neither marrying nor giving in marriage. Angels don't procreate, or they're not supposed to anyway. We'll hit that subject soon enough. But what God said was let us. But who is he talking to when he says let us? Well, there's a key to all of this because it says God created he him, male and female created he them. So the question is, and this is the confusing part, and this is where everybody gets it wrong. They think they have it right, but they're wrong. The us, the Apostle John touched on it. The us is, he called it God and the Word. At least that's the English translation. But the Word comes from the Greek logos. And of course, there's a counterpart to that in Hebrew. But logos, the logos is an actual entity. It's translated into English as the Word, but it's an entity that comes forth from the Father, if you will, or the Godhead, if you will. But the key to the whole thing is that he created them male and female. So the image of God, and notice it's a plural, us. So could the image of God be Adam, or is the image of God male and female, meaning Adam and Eve? They are the imagers. It takes, in order to be, and you got to understand the Hebrew word for God is alaim, and it's a plural word. You add im on the end of a word, it's like adding the letter S onto the end of the word. So the alaim, and that literally means the powerful ones or the mighty ones, plural. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. So if you look in the mirror and there's one person looking in the mirror, does he expect to see two people? Conversely, if two people are looking in the mirror next to each other, are they expecting to only see one person? What are they discussing here actually? So we get back to first John chapter 1. In the beginning was God and the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. What does that mean? And I hear people butcher that all the time. You know, and I'm not here to, I literally am not trying to down anyone for what they believe, because growing up, I grew up Catholic. So, you know, I was believing all sorts of stuff, right? So, you know, the rosary beads and the Mother Mary statues and all that stuff. But because of where I came from, I know that when the time is right, that Father Yahweh, that's his name, can bring anybody out of that and open their eyes and open their ears that they might see and perceive, right? So I don't ever go, hey, well, he's this or he's a that. He's, you know, he's going to hell or something. You know, it's by grace that he opens, it's a gift if he opens your eyes. Some people he won't open their eyes. And you got to understand that. You can't be frustrated by that. But for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, and I get it, this is an English translation, so maybe there's a lot wrong with the English translation. Well, there is, but at the same time, if you read it, you can still glean the purpose and the intent. I mean, for most people, the King James Version is the infallible word. Well, we all know who've studied King James and dug into the original languages, the etymology of words and all that. You know, there's a lot of problems with the King James Version. But that being said, it's probably the version I use most. So you just got to know where the potholes are. And you learn that over time and with guidance from the Holy Spirit. But getting back to the topic at hand, and God said, or the gods, or the Alaim said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. He's not talking to angels. The Most High is not procreating with angels. He's procreating with the Word, the Logos, this entity. And so a lot of people also get angry because they don't understand. What do you mean God is procreating with this entity? Go back to John chapter 1. In the beginning was God and the Word. And the term beginning means essentially eternity, from eternity, because God had no beginning. And because he had no beginning, he told Moses his name was, because he was giving Moses essentially, I guess it's grammatically an adjective as a name. He was describing himself. His most powerful attribute is he is eternal. So when Moses asks him what his name is, he says, Ahaya Asher Ahaya. I am that I am, or I will be what I will be. What he's saying, let's understand, is you can get so engrossed into straining at a gnat, but you swallow a camel. You swallow a camel, but you strain at a gnat. What he's telling Moses is, basically, I am without beginning or end. I just exist. I am life inherent. No beginning, no ending. No mother or father. There is no grave for me. I will exist perpetually. I am the sustainer of all things, the universe, the universes, the multiverse, whatever you want to call it. So just understand what he's telling Moses. I really don't need a name. I will give you something for you to hang your hat on. But what I'm going to give you is basically, I am the eternal, which means if I am the eternal, everything else was created by me, because nothing else is eternal. And so when Moses comes down the mountain, when the children of Israel ask what his name is, he says, Yahweh. Some people say Yahweh, some people say Yahweh, But the key is Yah. He's saying he will be. So when they ask Moses, what is his name? Essentially, Moses says, he is, or he will be. Or the sense he was imparting was the eternal. He just is, right? So I like to use the word eternal, because if you use that word, that term, it clicks. Everything starts to kind of make sense. So think of it in those terms. And if you do, you'll be able to put the puzzle together. So let's say Yahweh, his name. Let's use the word eternal when we translate it into English. Okay, but that's not the word used here. Yahweh is not used here. This word is Elohim, which means the powerful ones, right? And what you're going to find out is the entities we call angels are also called Elohim. And then you go, oh, see, that's what it means. It means God and the angels. They're both Elohim. Well, demons are Elohim. All Elohim is denoting, from the perspective of a human being or a man, is a spiritual entity more powerful than man, at least at this current point. But in this case, the Most High is creating something. He says, let us go down and make man in our image. If you looked at some of the descriptions of angels, angels are described as all sorts of weird things. Like they look like they got 4 faces. They got like 6 wings, and their feet are like the hooves of a cow or a calf. That's not the image. Men are created in the image of the Elohim, God and the Word. And remember, for those who have a problem with the Messiah being God, because it said he didn't find it robbery to make himself equal to God. But wait a minute. He prayed to God. He said, only God is good, meaning the Father. Well, you got to understand, he was in the flesh. The word became flesh. So, and that theme is throughout the Bible, because you'll see when if you really read it, it says, "And the Lord called down fire from the Lord in heaven." Oh, wait a minute, what does that mean? And Yahweh called down fire from Yahweh in heaven. So wait a minute, are there two of them? Well, the two are one. For this reason shall a man leave his mother and father, and he shall find a wife, and the two shall become one. But when we're talking about man, we're talking about the three dimensions of the material universe, which is embedded in the space-time continuum, meaning time affects us. But the Elohim are outside of the space-time continuums. Time does not affect them. It's not a thing. That's why he's eternal. It's like 1,000 years is but a day to him, and that's an exaggeration. 1,000,000,000 years is probably but a second from his perspective, or the Elohim's perspective. So that's a stumbling block for most people. But if you don't understand that principle, you kind of stumble through the whole Bible. I mean, you can glean, truths, but to get to the place where you really understand, you have to understand in the beginning was God and the Word. And the gods, or the Elohim, said, let us make man in our image. Dropping down, created he him, male and female created he them. So it says, so God created man in his own image. Okay, that's singular. What the heck's going on? And I'm not going to jump around, not on this channel. I do it on other channels, but on this channel, I'll just verbalize it to you, and then you can kind of, word search it if you'd like. But in this case, it said God created man in his own image. So how do you go from the plural back down to the singular, to the single format, to he and his? Created he him, meaning Adam. Created he them. Okay, so wait a minute. If there's God in the Word, in this case, who is God? Because it's singular now. Well, if you read the New Testament, it tells you that all things were made through, some people say Jesus Christ. The more correct phrase would be Yahusha HaMashiach. That's the Hebrew term. And when you have that understanding, he says, all things were made by him and for him, and was nothing made that he did not make. It's telling you. Now, I do know the sects that they can't stand that. They say, no, we're idolizing a man, Jesus or Yahusha, right, in place of God. But you cannot read the New Testament and not make Yahusha also God in the flesh. And that's going to upset a lot of people. My intent is not to upset you. My intent is to explain this. And if you understand these basic principles and then you read the Bible, everything makes sense, right? Everything. So here it goes singular, because all things were made through the Messiah. But the Messiah in the New Testament is a mortal man, right? That is true. But he existed. He said, before Abraham was, I am, or Yahweh, right? He's telling you clearly, if you have eyes to see and ears to hear, he's telling you who he is. But he said, the Father is greater than he is. The Father was in spirit. He was in fleshly form. But yet, even still, everything has good order. Adam was head over Eve. But both Adam and Eve are one, just like God and the Word are one. And they created or I don't want to use the term humans. There's a reason why. He created man, male and female created he them, and the two are one. And the Messiah, Yahusha, said, I and my Father are one, right? So, but what was Yahusha, Jesus, we use that term because a lot of you understand Jesus, right? What was he before he became man? It said he divested himself of his power. He became flesh. So what was he before he became flesh? And then go back to he created all things. So if I had to put it in a nutshell, I'm not going to keep you guessing in case you haven't figured it out. In the beginning was God and the Word. The Word became flesh. All things were made by the Word, for him, and by him, right? It tells you. So in the human realm, all things are made by the woman. I think it through. The Alaim are creating male and female men, because a woman is a man. I call women word men, right? Because they are kind of showing forth what, and I got to be careful here because I'm not trying to go down the path of the Queen of Heaven stuff. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying in function, God and the Word, but all things were made through the Word and for the Word. So they call Eve the mother of all living. All things were made by Eve, through Eve, right? But how was Eve able to create? By the power of that which flows from the man. In the case of the Elohim, the Word, all things are made and created by the Word through the power of the Holy Spirit, which is flowing from Yahweh, the Father. If you can see the parallels, I don't want to go too deep into it. I don't want to offend anyone, but there's a serious parallel here. And in the Hebrews at the time of Christ, it was not, we keep creating terms that are not in the scriptures. We create these terms and then make them doctrine, like monotheism. What the heck is that? Shema Israel, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai, Echad, right? Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. Yeah. And the Messiah told you, I am in my Father, and my Father in me. We are one. And that concept was well understood at the time of Christ, which is why John wrote, in the beginning was God and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So you have to come back to that concept. What did the Hebrews believe? Remember, these scriptures were written by Hebrews. This is not the Romans writing this stuff. The Romans hijacked the Hebrew scriptures. That's what happened. There are people who actually walk around on this earth and think, Jesus was a Roman or something. I don't know what they're thinking. No, the Messiah was a Yahudi. The generic Gentile term would be Jew. He was of the line of Yehuda or Judah. They go through his entire lineage in chapter 1 of Matthew. So understand the Hebrews, specifically the Israelites, even more specifically, the Yahudi and the Leviim, the Levites, right? And Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin, they collectively were dubbed and called, and they were called as first by the Babylonians who took them into captivity. They were called Jews, basically meaning Judeans, right? So that term is also a made up term. But the people of Islam or Muslims especially back in the 1500s, as they traversed in North Africa and into Sudan, and they were essentially, I don't want to say captured, but they were under the thumb of Islam. And so the difference between Islam and Christianity is that Islam allowed them to practice their religion pretty. They were second class citizens, but they were allowed to practice their religion, and they were called or dubbed by Islam as the Yahudi. So because the Aramaic language is similar, so they would call them by what they call themselves, the Yahudim or Yahudi. So anyway, the Yahudi we call today the Jews, right? So anyway, but you have people who think that Jesus is a Roman, or the Messiah is a Roman. No, he's a Yahudi, a Jew. And you got to understand, all these scriptures are written by Israelites, Hebrews, and they're written to Hebrews, and they're actually written for Hebrews. Now, I am not saying that Gentiles cannot be grafted in. I'm not saying that. Although there are a lot of people who believe that. I'm not a hardliner like that, because the Most High, His mercies are, like King David said, "Let me not fall into the hand of man, but I'll fall into your hand, Father, because I know you are merciful." You know what I'm saying? He's on another level. He's got a plan. Now, we have our biases and prejudices of who we think should go, for instance, should go to heaven and who should go to hell. You know what I'm saying? But the Most High is above all the fray. And He's got a plan. So anyway, I harp on this for a while because it's so important. And I'll probably talk about this more. But yeah, so God created man in His own image. In the image of God created He him, male and female. So the him is singular, but that would be the Word, because all things were created by the Word, but empowered by the Holy Spirit. I hope you can see the parallels. All things were created by Eve, but through the power of Adam's seed. So if you can see the symbolism there, and the parallelisms, you get the picture. Hopefully you're picking up what I'm putting down, but that's the key element there. Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, "Be fruitful and multiply." Yes, the first commandment, and that was a very important commandment. So important that He intervened directly in the affairs of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Because the Satans, Ashatan, the adversaries, they're trying to sabotage men every step of the way. They're trying to sabotage men, But if you go back to the Sodom and Gomorrah, you see what their sin was, and they were basically violating this thing here. Be fruitful and multiply, because if you are in a certain state of mind, you will not be fruitful and multiply. I don't know if you following what I'm saying, but because humanity was in such a young state, He intervened immediately on that one. He said, "I got to root that sin out right now, just to give human or men time to multiply. They can't go off on that tangent because they won't multiply." And remember, this is the first thing He commanded. He even commanded it of animals and trees and vegetation. He said, multiply. He's trying to establish something, and nothing in the heavens or under the earth or on earth was going to stop that. And He made sure, because He intervened immediately. You know the story. He rained down, here I go again, and the Lord rained down fire and brimstone from the Lord in heaven. So wait a minute. Who's the first Lord and who's the second Lord? Well, let's flip that. And Yahweh rained down fire and brimstone from Yahweh in heaven. Well, essentially, the Messiah showed you the principle. He prayed to the Father in heaven, and the Father responded to him. So when you have Yahweh on the ground, he gets on the celly, calls Yahweh, who's on his throne in heaven, and he sent down the fire and brimstone. That gets deep, and I know a lot of I know it's a tough one, right? But if you understand the principle, it starts to connect all the way through the scriptures. It's the only thing that makes sense. Everything else, there are hiccups in it. Not in this. The two are one, right? So, and in our carnal mind, we can't contemplate that. No, there's two people. God, he's monotheistic. There's only one. But in the spirit world, if I take two gases and put it in a bottle, they kind of become one. You can't tell where the hydrogen ends and where the oxygen begins, right? You got, you know what I'm saying? So the spirit world is different. Our world is but a shadow of the spirit world, you know. So it's hard for our carnal minds to understand that concept. But he gives you examples. You know, when I think about electricity, for instance, right? I have to put it in terms of fluid mechanics because you can't see electricity moving, but you can see water in a pipe moving. And so I know if I throttle the flow, right? It's in electrical, it's like putting a resistor in the system, right? So you got all this amperage, but you want to throttle the amperage down, blah blah blah. You know, and then you have capacitors which will store charge. Well, in plumbing, you would have a tank that stores water. So you always have a kind of a stored up water supply that could get things, you know, moving in a hurry, right? Sort of, kind of. So the Most High gives us examples in the physical realm that gives us an idea of what's going on in the spiritual realm. So it's the same kind of thing. Anyways, so let's see. And he had dominion over everything on there. What Yah was doing, what the Most High was doing, he essentially, and there's a whole lot of other scriptures out here. The 66 books of the Bible are not the end all be all. The Romans made sure that they only included what they wanted to include. But if you see what was in the Dead Sea Scrolls, remember the Dead Sea Scrolls were hidden by the faithful to protect it from destruction of Gentiles. So there's a lot more scriptures than just the 66 books of the Bible, right? And of course, you know, we're talking really the Old Testament, but there's a lot more than just those books. You know, like the Book of Enoch. You have to read that book. Anyway, when you get a chance, read that book. You know, the Book of Jubilees, the Book of Yasher, which is referenced twice in the 66 books of the Bible. The Book of Yasher, right? As it is written in the Book of Yasher. So why would the Bible mention the Book of Yasher if it was not something we were supposed to read? In fact, I remember reading that going, oh, what is this Book of Yasher, right? You know, it'd be really good to know what was in it because it keeps referencing this Book of Yasher as it is written in the Book of Yasher, right? And I said, well, it probably got destroyed or something. You know, it turns out it's a bestseller. So immediately I purchased that book and read it, and it's a lot of good stuff in that book, right? Same with the Book of Jubilees. You know, of course, there are also the apocryphal writings. So, you know, I'm just throwing that out there because those books do give you a better understanding of the 66 books. There's stuff mentioned by Peter and Jude and even the Messiah himself that are not in the Bible, but they're in the Book of Enoch. so So I guess they used to read the book of Enoch, apparently, So if that is good enough for them, it's good enough for me, right? So anyway, I'm getting back on track here. So let's see. So he told them to be fruitful and multiply, which we started getting off on a tangent. Then he had to intervene. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. So in the beginning, God told us to eat basically vegetation. And so you have vegetarians running around, especially those that have knowledge of the Bible, saying, "See, you're not supposed to eat meat. You're supposed to only eat fruits and vegetables." Well, starting out the gate, that was kind of true, but something twisted happened after the fall of man, and he had to work by the sweat of his brow. Yeah, he kind of had to build muscle and get more protein. I mean, just things changed after the fall. And so even after that, the priests, the Levites, how did they survive? They lived off of the sacrifices, meat. And then he gives the children of Israel a list of meats that they could eat, the clean. And then he gives them a list that they're not good to eat. They're unclean. So you have to understand the Bible is a living document, and it's following the progress, or I don't know if we want to call it progress, the ascension of man into impropriety, basically. So now we need meat just to be healthy now. Just you kind of, I mean, we've all seen it. If you're a vegetarian and you look at a vegetarian, he looks jaundiced, thin. He doesn't look strong. I'm just saying, that's my observation. I could be wrong on that, but I think people are supposed to be eating meat at this juncture in the story of man. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. So lions used to eat vegetation. And if you know the story, and the lion laying down with the lamb means we're going back to that Edenic state at some point. In fact, you're going to find out the whole purpose of the kingdom is to do what Adam failed to do. He was supposed to extend Eden all across the earth. And he failed. So the first Adam failed, but the second Adam is going to accomplish it. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Okay, so the sixth day represents man. That's the day of man. And we've all heard that, what is that statement? 1,000 years is but a day to the Most High. That's actually a thing. Because remember, he told Adam, in the day you eat of that fruit, ye shall surely die. Well, did Adam die that day? Nope. But if 1,000 years is but a day, let's ask the other question. Did Adam live to be 1,000 years old? No, he died at 930 years old, just shy of 1,000 years. So technically, using that logic, he did die in that millennial day. So anyway, and that's another point I want to make when we talk about the 6 days of creation. When he's talking to Adam, and he talks about he shall die in that day, but what he was really saying, you will die in that millennial period, that millennial day. See, the 6th day could have been 1,000 years long, because guess what? The 7th day is 1,000 years long, and that's called the millennial reign of the Messiah, right? So anyway, wow. I was going to go into I was going to go into day 7, but look at this. Yeah, you know what? I'll try to go into day 7 because wow, we just yeah, John 1 through 5. Look at that. So let me see if I can back out and get to day 7. Day 7. So this would be Genesis 2. I think it was in 2. So as you can see, I'm using a different format for this channel. It's the old school hack. Just pull up the old screen and show it. Let's see. Thus the heaven and the earth will finish, and all the hosts of them. And on the 7th day, the Most High, the Elohim, or Yahweh, I'm not sure how that one's translated at that point, but on the 7th day, the Elohim ended, or Yahweh ended his work, which he had made. And he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. Okay. And God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. Wow. Okay. And we can get into that. For time's sake, I'm probably not going to do that. I mean, but if you have your mind made up, you have your mind made up. And I know there are Christians who will pull out all sorts of scriptures saying, see, the Sabbath day was done away with. Christ is our rest. Now, we'll make that another subject. I won't talk about that now, but I'll leave it at this. After Christ had ascended into heaven, did the disciples stop observing the Sabbath? Nope. Did they teach the nations to observe the Sabbath? Yes. Because Paul kept going to where? To the synagogues. And that wasn't on a Wednesday. That wasn't on a Tuesday. And definitely wasn't on a Sunday. And in those synagogues were not only the Yahudi, the Jews, but also proselytes, people, proselytes, yeah. People that were becoming Jews through proselytization, right? So even they understood you could become a Jew as a convert. You could be converted to Judaism. And I'm going to end on this, but if you go into the books written by, like, the Wars of the Jews by the Yahudi historian Josephus, he talks about the different sects, the Pharisees, who they were, where they came from, the Sadducees, who they were, and where did they come from. But then he talks about the Essenes, and he says the Essenes are Jews by birth. So wait a minute. A lot of it's not saying all Pharisees were foreigners. It's not saying all Sadducees were foreigners. But if you understand some of the systems that were actually brought into Israel, Judah in this case, the term Farsi is part of a Far Eastern religion, Farsi. And then the Sadducees were very Hellenized. They didn't believe in the spiritual things. they what resurrection, But then there were the Essenes, who were Jews by birth. So what would they call Mary and Joseph? They would probably be denoted as Essenes. You follow? They are Jews by birth, and their lineage was known. So anyway, I'm gonna bug out on that note, and I don't know. I got something in my head. It was from that Superman movie, but it's now stuck in my head. There's a line. It's kind of a meme now, and he says, And that's the real punk rock. And I didn't know what it meant, but for some reason it seemed appropriate. And so I'll say that's the real punk rock. So we'll see you on the next video. We'll get off into more of Genesis chapter 2. And remember, Genesis is not one of those books you can read as a book. Every line is packed with meaning, and you got to understand it. And so I'm going to take, it might take 10 years to get through this Bible, but I'm going to attempt to do it, breaking it down much the way I've just done. I'm not asking anybody to just wholesale agree with me. Study to show yourself approved, and iron sharpens iron, right? You don't sharpen iron with a feather. You need iron to sharpen iron, metaphorically, right? And kind of literally. But on that note, Yah bless you all, and shalom.
Lions Coloring Book for Kids, Volume 2. Available August 15, 2025 on Amazon. The Bible Lions Coloring Book for Children. Color 30 fun designs of inspirational verses and Christian artwork. A beautiful children's coloring book designed to fill your child's mind with the positive words of God's love. The Bible Lions Coloring Book for Kids was designed to be a fun, yet effective way to help children calm their tension. Hand-lettered quotes and adorable hand-designed illustrations will inspire your child as they reflect on God's promises.